we must recognize that tackling energy poverty isn't simply about the ambitious expansion of electricity capacity. That is not enough. We must understand the barriers to access for those currently living in energy poverty and put in place the policy conditions necessary to overcome these barriers. All stakeholders have a role in pioneering innovative solutions that deliver energy access and energy services to poor people. Rachel, I want to come to you because it's clear that SEforALL, Sustainable Energy for All, is playing an important role in pioneering a new approach to the delivery of sustainable energy. And I'm talking in particular about your new initiative, the People-Centred Accelerator, which will be launched today. What are the enabling conditions that can allow for a rapid spread of sustainable energy services, and how can SEforALL help promote a greater focus on reaching the furthest behind first?
People will talk about trillions of dollars and billions of dollars, you know, and it's sort of the development equivalent of the trickle-down theory, right? At some point that's going to arrive. And yet at the same time, there's this desperate need for access to the right kind of priced local currency finance available in the local market, where people understand, you know, the risk that they should take as a community banker, for example, on their own community. So it seems to us that there's sort of two conversations and they're not been meeting in the middle. So one of the things that we want to do is try to have that conversation meet in the middle. Frankly, we also want to just burst through the poverty of ambition in the development movement.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if I
like that expression.
Yeah.
We have to do this before we reach 2030 and not leave that 780 million people behind the future. I mean, it's unconscionable. It's not acceptable.
I think what we're trying to do is take the data and evidence, listen to you about the bottom-up need for urgency, and try to get some of this top-down supply coming in a way that it can be used. So it has to be at the right price, it has to be in the right place, at the right time, in the right format. So I think, you know, as a small team sitting somewhere in the engine room of this global movement, marshalling the evidence, bringing people together, supporting partnership, and then trying to document and show the amount of new innovative financing and deals and excitement that there is. This is about shifting the mindset away from an incumbent attitude to the energy system, which is that it will be carbonized, centralized, and if it gets to you, good, and if it doesn't, well, you know. And also shaking off the inertia of the energy system and actually embracing what technology is telling us, what finance is telling us, what people are telling us, which is that we can go faster, we can go cheaper, further, if we actually embrace the off-grid opportunity.
Some of the lessons that we've learned is, and I'll just take off from where Rachel left off, is really changing the narrative. And I think and changing the entry point of how we deal with gender issues when we're setting the agenda and when we're setting priorities for a lot of our decision making. And I think changing the narrative has been something that we have managed to do in SEforALL.
I'm optimistic that now we're beginning to shift the narrative, we can start to attract more people in because we're talking about the opportunity, not just talking about the risk.
Yes, there's lack of energy access in this area, but it's not happening in a vacuum. That things are going on, that people have been living there, they've been coping, and they've got a lot of resilient strategies. And where scale up and the multiplier effect where you get a multiplier effect is when you embed your interventions, your scale up interventions, in those resilient instruments that they're using. Financing, what we have found is that financing is available even at the local level, but it's where you find that financing and where you find that financing that is affordable and accessible and is also, because it's a trust relationship.
That's our first challenge. How do we get the finance to countries like Malawi? The second challenge then is most of the energy companies, the business models that we have at the moment are reaching the people that have about $10 a day to $2 a day income. How do we get it below that? And that's what's so exciting about the Malawi approach, is that they really are reaching the very poorest. So a very impressive intervention. When we're intervening to reach those very poorest, we have to be really clear what are the triggers, at which point we start to withdraw.
Yeah. You mix in a world with big investors. You're comfortable in that world. You know how to talk to them. Now, come on. How are we going to get more investment to reach those who mustn't be left behind?
The multilateral financial institutions are expensive, lend in dollars, and one can argue that there's a useful conversation to be had with them about whether they're taking enough risk, given the urgency of the agenda, given that every single one of their shareholders agreed to this, and given that we despoil this planet, we can't build another one. So, why would you keep your money back for something in 50 years if everything's going to go to hell in the next 20, right?
I completely agree with you, Rachel, that public investment must be more risk-seeking. This is not just an issue in developing economies and emerging economies. It's true in the developed world as well. I mean, we're radically under-invested in infrastructure in the developed world, despite the obvious productivity benefits. We have in this state of New York and in the state immediately north of us, Connecticut, green investment banks that are that have a mandate to take on risks that the private sector is not yet willing to take, to kind of prove out financing opportunities where commercially minded investors are not ready to go. I think we need to have the same mentality for development finance and have an attitude that says public investment should be taking on risks that the private sector is not willing to take.
I think we need to see access to energy as a public good in the same way as health and education, and that's the bottom line, and that nobody should be left behind.
At the end of the day, we have to see people, see who they really are, see what they're capable of, and come in and bridge the gap. I mean, that's why we have libraries, and that's why we have some of the services in the developed world. And why should the developing world be any different? And we've heard from philanthropists from the developing world over the last 2 days saying that this is their moment, right? So the African philanthropies have to stand up.
But we need to try everything at this point to reach those hardest to reach places. And just talking about volumes, just talking about overall numbers isn't enough. We do need to break it down now.
Philanthropic dollars.
Yes.
We should be very risk-seeking.
Yeah.
And that is something that me and some of my colleagues have really emphasized to our community. That should be our model. Because actually private capital is not particularly risk-seeking, or I should say, it always wants a return for the risk that it takes on.
Yeah.
We're starting to turn, with all of the many, many, many partners, we're sort of saying, okay, so what are you committing to doing? What's the ambition level? What do you need to get that done? And then try to just sort of like start showing that, start showcasing it, start building it up, start telling that story.